Hey everyone, now that we know some basics about normal distributions and how the mean and standard deviations work, let's apply them to some data examples that we studied in class on Monday. Look at the mean and standard deviation of OBP and slugging, which I've written down right here. We did this in class in 2019. Find the intervals for which we could expect for roughly 95% of the players. I'll do OBP in blue ink and slugging in red ink. Well, since our data is roughly normal, then we know roughly 95% of players should have OBP in the interval what's it going to be? 345 minus 2 times the standard deviation, and then 345 plus 2 times the standard deviation. And that's going to give us, well, let's see, 345 minus 62. That's going to give us 283, right? So it's going to give us a lower bound of 283. And an upper bound, let's see, 345 plus 62, going to give us upper bound of 417. Right, so we would expect that roughly 95% of the players in 2019 have OBP values within this range. We'll check a bit later to see if that's really true. Okay. Now, in red ink, we'll do the same thing with slugging. Okay. Roughly 95% of players should have slugging in the interval. Let's see what this is going to be. Try to avoid with the text. Okay, we're going to have 481 minus 2 times 0.067, and then 481 plus 2 times 0.067. That's going to equal, well, let's see what we've got here. 481 minus 2 times 67. What is that going to be? 134, I think? Yeah, I guess 134. Right, so that's going to be 347, I think. And then if we add 134, we're going to get 615. Okay. All right, so just to show you, these are our two intervals that we're interested in. Let's just take a very quick look to see how effective and accurate these estimates are, right? Because we can actually check the data, right? So if we take a look, actually, here we can go to Fangraphs right here. If we take a look for the year 2019, and we take a look at player OBP, let's take a look at how many players have an OBP outside of our range. Well, we said before, let's pull in right here. 417 was the upper bound, so I count 1, 2, 3 players with higher OBP than 417. All right. Okay. Let's take a look now at the minimum, right? So that was 3 players, okay? Let's find players with OBP less than 283. 1. Okay. So it looks then like we have a total of 4 players, right? Just one more double check, right? Right? 1, 2, 3, yep. So there are a total of 4 players with OBP outside of our range. Okay. So let's just note that really quickly, right? 4 out of how many players was that? What? 4 out of how many? I thought they said how many players. Let me just try this one more time. Oh, 135, right? They say that. Right, 135 items, right? They say it right there. Okay, so 135 items. With OBP out of range. So in other words, we have 131 out of 135. 131 within the range. Let's see this right here. 131 divided by 135. What's that approximately? All right, it's going to be, I think, a little bit higher than 95%, but not by much. 131 divided by 135. 135. 97. Okay, so pretty good. That was a pretty good estimate, right? Let's take a look at slugging, right? Let's do it over here, maybe. We're looking for people who slugged lower than 347 and above 615, right? So if we take a look at slugging. All right, we've got some very high numbers. Wow, look at Christian Yelich. 1, 2, 3, 4 people who slugged higher than 615. Okay, remember that. 4 players at, again, 135. And what was the lower bound? It was 347. 1, 2. So it looks like we've got 6 players all together. So 6 out of 135 with slugging out of range. In other words, we had 129 out of 135 with slugging within range. And just to be clear, 129 out of 135 equals approximately, let's do the math here. I'm just going to do some quick division on my phone over here. Feel free to do it along. 95.5% rounded up and you get 96%. Pretty good estimates, right? I did not know the range of the data going into this. I just crunched the numbers, found the mean, found the standard deviation. And based on those 2 numbers, I was able to get a very good estimate for the rough data range, right? For the range that 95-ish% of the players had, right? Okay, now one issue that you might have with these numbers is you could say, well, given these numbers, which is more impressive? A player with an OBP of, I don't know, 500 and slugging of 450, or a player with OBP of 450 and slugging 500. Now, there's no correct answer to this question, I think. But one concern, you can say whatever you want for whatever reason, but one concern is that OBP and slugging have different standard deviations. So judge accordingly. Right, they have different standard deviations. So keep that in mind when comparing the stats. Right? Keep that in mind when comparing the stats that, a 500 slugging might not be as impressive as a 500 OBP, right? Because the OBP has a lower mean and a lower standard deviation. Okay. So I'd probably err on the side of higher OBP as opposed to higher slugging, but there are arguments to be made either side, in either case, right? You can try to figure out the number of standard deviations that 500 and 450 are from their means. You find their z-scores. But just keep in mind that their means and standard deviations are different. Okay? So the problem with the OPS stat is that adding OBP and slugging can make it, or maybe I should say can blur player comparisons because the stats have different means and standard deviations. There's no easy fix, but a couple of fixes could include just not adding them, listing OBP slugging separately. You could actually try multiplying them. Still not perfect. You still have issues with variance there, but it is an approach. Or just coming up with a different stat altogether. Right? These are ways of sort of getting around that issue. That said, OPS is still a good statistic, but it does have some flaws.